What's up, everybody? I'm Dr. CBS here with Dr. Jared Ball, and you're tuned in to episode 1 of The Last Dope Intellectual.
What's up, everybody? What's up, Dr. CBS?
Hey. All right, y'all. So it is here. The show is here, The Last Dope Intellectual. And so every show will start off with a segment called Shoot the Shit, where me and Dr. Jared Ball will shoot the shit. And today's topic is this show and how it came about. And so I'm sure people are curious, like, why now? What's going on? What's up with the name? So I will start out. So basically, like many of the sort of things that have happened in the last 6 months, I had a tweet that said, I would like to have a segment on somebody's podcast. And of course, Dr. Jared Ball reached out and was like, hey, you could do a show. And I was like, I don't know if I should do a show, because I have a little bit of consternation about this because I don't want to duplicate efforts that have already been made. I'm not sure if I have anything particularly original to say, but, Jared and I have been in conversation for a couple of months, actually. And so here it is. So that's basically what the foundation is of the show. What do you think, Jared?
You clearly have plenty to say. You clearly have a unique voice. So it stands to reason that you would have your own show and your own platform to have that voice from, or to throw that voice out from. But specifically this point about duplicating efforts, just from my humble point of view, I like to think, whether it's officially organized in such a way or not, that what you and I and others are trying to do is creating a sort of media ecosystem to rival others, so that if others can turn on something 24/7 and get nonsense, it would be nice to think that we are producing a situation where people could tune in 24/7 to a series of non-nonsense.
Yes, or nonsense adjacent. And so I've had a conversation with a couple, other black radical folks who are on media, like Sean Blackmon and Eugene Puryear. And, everybody had pretty much the same thing to say, that all of our shows are mutually reinforcing, and that, we can never have too much Black left content, even if we have, similar, overlapping, or the same audiences. We're all coming at this thing from different angles. And certainly, if we're being inundated 24 hours a day by CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, and whatever, and they can, replay the same garbage on whatever 24-hour loop they have, then surely we can have some reinforcing themes across our platform. So this is The Last Dope Intellectual. By the way, my shirt says proletariat versus the bourgeoisie. So, in the spirit of things. So the show name, The Last Dope Intellectual, what does it mean? It really doesn't have any sort of grand meaning other than the fact that, I think I'm dope. I think I'm an intellectual. And in terms of The Last Dope Intellectual, it's just, a little bit of bravado. Like I was saying, I'm at least the penultimate, dope intellectual. But, I always have this quote in mind from Booker T. Washington, interestingly enough, where he talks about the alignment of head, heart, and hand. And I feel like I have that as an academic and as an intellectual. And so, it's something that I really enjoy. It's something I think I'm pretty good at, and that is also challenging for me. And so, and then in terms of being dope, that really has a lot to do with the fact that I feel like I'm relatively, fearless. I have a little bit of courage. And so I kind of just say what comes to mind. I have my own style. I try to be myself. And so that's just what it is. That's, so The Last Dope Intellectual, I've had that as a sort of moniker across my social media platforms for a very long time. And so I just thought it was a fitting title for the show. So, who wants smoke? Like, people mad?
No, for me, it's a lovely throwback to some hip hop history and traditions. One of my favorite mixtape DJs is DJ K Slay, aka Slap Your Favorite DJ. And so it has that little kind of to it that I like. So, The Last Dope Intellectual, why not?
Here we are, LDI. A little bit more about the show. Essentially how I see it, it's a show that will have a bunch of different types of segments that are based on, things that I'm interested in talking about. I'll have some interviews. Every show won't have an interview, maybe every other show, maybe one show a month, depending on how much I want to talk to other folks. I don't know. And so we'll always have, start the show off shooting the shit, Jared and I, and we'll always end with the segment what I'm on, where I'll just talk about something that I'm working on, a piece of writing, which is, generally what I'm working on, or some other sort of aspect of my work. But then there'll be, interspersed throughout different shows, there'll be other segments like one called In These Tweets that we'll do today, where we, discuss what's happening in the Twitterverse, something on my timeline, I'll be tweeting all sorts of stuff. And so we'll talk about that, because Twitter is, a place where a lot of conversations happen. Another segment, History of the Present, that we'll do today, I'll read a quote from a historical document and just talk about it in the context of what's happening today. Of course, I'll have book recommendations. We'll have every once in a while segment, Ask Dr. CBS. I can, offer some advice on, if you guys have questions about whatever, mostly academic stuff though. I don't, I'm not Dr. Love or anything, so I don't have, crazy stuff. But there'll be a session or a segment called Classes in Session, where I will have students and youth, because we need to talk to the younger generation. And I'm interested in what their experience has been in education under COVID. People who are, if they're considering going to college, not going to college, if you're in college, what has that experience been like? Young student organizers. And so I definitely want to have a youth voice and a youth presence. So that's just some of the stuff that we'll be talking about. It's a little bit of everything, all academic oriented, all Black left oriented, well, academic and, organizer based, but definitely always from a Black left perspective. So that is what we're doing. I hope that people enjoy it. I hope that people will be engaged, and we will see how it goes. What do you think, Jared?
I love it. Let's go.
Yeah.
Can't wait.
All right. So speaking of segments, the segment I'll turn to now is called History of the Present. And again, this is just where I will have a quote from a historical document and then just talk about why it's resonating with me, what I think about it, and its meaning for what's going on in our world today. So today's quote is from a document that I actually posted on Twitter called Negro History Month. And it was published in 1954 by William L. Patterson, who, of course, was the editor of the seminal petition to the UN, We Charge Genocide. He was a member of the Civil Rights Congress. He was a member of the International Labor Defense, one of the lawyers for the Scottsboro Boys. Just an amazing person. I'm tweeting about him all the time. And so this was a document he published during Black History Month in 1954, where he's basically talking about not only the importance of Black history, but also the effects of having to have a separate Black History Month itself. So in other words, the erasure and obscuring of Black history from mainstream history. So I'm going to read this quote. He said, "Only those who are incurable racists, cursed by greed for super profits, could seek over the centuries to hide the cultural wealth that Negroes have given to the development of their country. Only those who seek to rob Black men and women of their heritage of freedom, justice, and democracy, and prevent the unity of the American people, would seek to hide facts which testify to the contributions of Negroes to the industrial growth and might of their country. Historical lies have a place in the program of those who would destroy the very essence of democracy. Only those who are enemies of mankind can seek to deny to nationals of their own country a record of the fruits of their sweat and blood, because those nationals bear a different color or worship at a different shrine. Such is the course of savages ruling in a modern exploitative society." So that's just bars to me. He goes on to say, "Those who from the days of slavery have done this evil thing are the McCarthyites of America. Their racist policies and lynch practices can lead only to an American brand of fascism if they are not crushed by an aroused people." So we can see how this quote resonates in many ways with much of what's happening today. First of all, it is Black History Month, which, as we know, started out as Negro History Week in 1926 or 1927. I always get that confused. Became Negro History Month or Black History Month 50 years later under President Gerald Ford. And Black History Month really fits into the conundrum that William Patterson is talking about. Because on the one hand, Black history is history, right? In the context of the United States, Black history is American history writ large. But at the same time, we also have to, we have been forced or we have been compelled to set aside a month that prioritizes Black history because of the erasures, the lies, the obscuring, and the discrediting that tends to take place not only in K through 12 education, but also in the dominant discipline of history itself. Which we're constantly having to sort of push back against and to revise. It reminds me kind of about, it reminds me of how we say or talk about racial capitalism, right? When we say racial capitalism, it doesn't mean that there's a non-racial capitalism, but because people often try to evade the question of race and the ways that racialization and the sort of the racial subjection of racialized people is endemic in the capitalist system, we say racial capitalism. Likewise, even though we acknowledge that Black history is part of broader American history, we have this month to really acknowledge the tremendous contributions and the struggle, issues, problems, and triumphs of Black people, not only in the United States, but throughout the diaspora. Because again, this is something that we don't, this history is not a history that we are generally exposed to. Of course, because we are in a modern exploitative society ruled by savages, to paraphrase William Patterson, of course, this month has become commodified. So you got McDonald's with, whatever, the Negro Shake, and you got, all of these different corporations taking advantage of Black History Month. They're starting to do it to Juneteenth too. So, we can have exactly nothing. But, and people will commodify it, or it gets reduced to these obscure, Black firsts, or these, random Black history facts that are made to narrate, the progress of the American state, that over time we've persevered and we've done better. And so there's ways in which the sort of militant or the corrective project of Black history has become commodified, or has become yet another tool of the ruling class to make money off of Blackness and Black people. But we continue, right? So the other way in which Patterson quotes resonates is he talks about the ways in which racist policies and lynch practices are essentially an American brand of fascism, and that this brand of fascism will rear its ugly head if the people are not aroused. That is to say, if the overwhelming majority of progressive, radical, and even liberal folks do not stand up. And where do we see this happen? Of course, we saw this happen on January 6, 2021. So Patterson's overall point, in my perspective, is that fascism is endemic in the US state, but it rears its head at different historical moments, especially when the organization and the militancy of progressive forces is especially weak. And I believe that we are in one of these times. The other aspect of that is that these fascist forces rear their heads at times when in sort of a counter-revolutionary or a reactionary response to the militancy of progressive, racialized, and oppressed forces. And so essentially what Patterson is saying is that the suppression of Black history and the fact that we have to pull out Black history and sort of indeed convey that it is there is part of this long history of white supremacy in the United States, and the ways in which that white supremacy tends towards particular types of fascist formations. And that the only way in which we can challenge this, and we can continue to challenge this, is through the sort of the continued and systematic insurgency of the people who are subjected to such erasure, such obscuring, and such discrediting. So the other ways in which I think Patterson's quote resonates is when we think about that raggedy ass 1776 project, right? Which essentially was reifying US mythology, was meant to discredit as anti-American or un-American, what they call wokeness, or even any sort of progressive approach to understanding history, any critique of racism and slaveholding. And so essentially, the 1776 project conveys precisely what Patterson is critiquing in that quote, and precisely what Patterson is calling out in a general sense in that the piece as a whole. And so the other reason, another reason why I chose to read that quote, not only because it's Black History Month, but also to challenge what I have called intellectual McCarthyism, what I talk about all the time, which is the ways in which we don't even really know about a William Patterson in the ways that we know about a sanitized version of Martin Luther King Jr. or a sanitized version of W.E.B. Du Bois or a sanitized version of Rosa Parks, because of the ways in which leftists, and particularly Black leftists, Black anti-capitalists, Black radicals are disciplined out of our knowledge and understanding. And so when I do these history of the present quotes, I really am going to lift up and highlight these Black radicals who we don't know, or who we only know very little about, or who, when we know about them, we know some liberalized version of their import and of what they have actually contributed to not only US society, but to the world as a whole. And so the last thing that I'll just say about this William Patterson quote is that something about this quote that we see, and something about, I would say, William Patterson and Black leftists more broadly, is the courage, right? That people who have these politics and people who stand for, redistribution of wealth and resources, human equality, decolonization, the end of imperialism, the end of forever wars. These people have to have courage, right? Courage is a very, very important ethic to these people. And I think that if we also are going to engage in these struggles, we also have to have courage, right? And we cannot be distracted or deterred by conversations about so-called cancel culture or about the threat of repression. The repression is going to be there. We know this. William Patterson was subjected to it. In fact, after filing the We Charge Genocide petition with the United Nations, his passport was canceled, but he continued, and we also must continue, and we must continue to levy the types of critiques that William Patterson offered in his piece, Negro History Month, again, written in 1954. So that is our first History of the Present episode. I hope to hear feedback from you all on what you thought about the quote and about William Patterson in general. All right, so that was our first segment of History of the Present. I hope to hear from you all on what you thought about it and what you thought about William Patterson more broadly. So now we're going to lighten the mood a little bit, turn to the segment called In These Tweets, where me and Jared will discuss the Twitter scuttlebutt.
Yes,
so Jared,
indeed.
What is going on? What did you find?
So there's a couple of things I'm gonna pull up here real quick for us to look at and to ask you about. Starting with this one here, actually, because I thought, well, first of all, I thought this whole episode was funny. So I loved seeing it on your timeline, and wanted to have you maybe elaborate a little bit more about Miss Yellen and this whole chicanery here with taking $810,000 in speakers fees from people she's supposed to be in oversight of.
Yeah. So I think Janet Yellen, I want to say she was the head of the Fed under Obama. So the first thing to point out is the ways in which it seems to me that Joe Biden is simply recycling all of these people who are from the Obama administration. And so how can we respect a leader who is simply like, I'm gonna just do what he did? Like, has he no ingenuity? Has he no political acumen of his own? So that's the first point. So, okay, so he picked Janet Yellen. The second thing is 810. Go ahead.
And I just want to be clear, this is not her on this is the announcement. I know, just in case it wasn't clear, I'm forgetting this woman's name, but this is not Yellen on the screen here. This was the new press secretary announcing the decision, right? Or responding to questions about the decision.
Yes, responding to questions about the decision. So basically, this is, the press secretary is writing for her girls, saying that this woman deserves almost $1 million in speaking fees from the very people that she will ultimately be in charge of,
right.
Having oversight over or regulating. And it just shows, number one, the revolving door from the private to the public sector and back again. And number two, the ways in which these politicians can't be trusted, because the Congress and the people, the Congress and the executive branch and the people with whom they fill their cabinets are a bunch of rich people, a bunch of millionaires, people who are not going to discipline their friends unless, of course, it's competition, and people who cannot be trusted to represent poor and working class and oppressed people. And so this to me is just indicative of that. It's just, it's a hustle. So like these people, they become lifelong politicians to get a bag. And I just,
and we're not playing it. We're not playing the video, but if people ever, if they see it or they go back and watch it, what's funny about it is that her response, and that's Jen Psaki is the woman's name. I had to quickly look it up. I forgot. But her response to the question about all of this is, well, hey, we have the most diverse cabinet and Janet Yellen is a woman. That's literally her response, to say, don't, in other words, don't look at all the nonsense that we're engaged in. Look at the fact that we have some black people, and in this case, a woman involved in it. So I just thought,
yeah. And then she said what? No, and she's an expert and deserves that money.
That's right. It literally said, right.
All right.
All right. So this one, it cracked me up when I saw it initially. It cracked me up when I heard the story. It cracked me up when I looked at it again. So I had to clearly bring this one up for your discussion as well. This issue of Black Lives Matter having been nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize, and you were adding that pretty sure the Garvey movement had that designation. Now, what exactly was it that you were speaking to in terms of the designation, and what is the juxtaposition that you're looking to highlight here?
Well, it says it's more so, we hold the largest social movement in global history.
Got you.
No, they don't. That's Garvey. It was Garvey then and it's Garvey now. So that was my point. The Nobel Prizes, mean, when, once Obama got the Nobel Prize, the droner in chief. Okay, this was before he was the droner in chief, but we knew it was coming. Once I gave this man the Nobel Prize, I guess simply for being Black and having been elected president, then I just kind of, it's like,
And in fact, that announcement, the guy said, I remember the announcement clearly. He said, we are giving him the prize, that is Obama, the Peace Prize, in the hopes that he will earn it. Because I went to my students that very semester and said, so I just came back from the president and the dean's office and let them all know I have given you all A's at the beginning of the semester in the hopes that by the end you will earn that designation.
Yeah, well, hopefully he gave that fucking money back, because I don't know that he earned. I am relatively
clearly he didn't earn it,
and he did not earn it. So here's a fun fact. The only Black person to win a Nobel Prize, not in literature and not in peace, is W. Arthur Lewis. He won it in economics. But Black people get the Nobel Prize in peace and in literature. And then there's one in economics. So I don't know what that says, but I just wanted to point that out. But whatever. My point was that the Garvey movement is the biggest movement. Yeah,
correct. Obviously, right. Absolutely. So. Right. And then it would still be, and it could be questions about the Blackness of the movement anyway. That could be compared to a question as well. But anyway, this one here, very simple, very almost elegant in its design and presentation. Modern U.S. racial capitalism is rooted in the imbrication of anti-Blackness and anti-radicalism. Quote, end quote. You were quoted here by Mutual Aid for the Homies you kind of already spoke to some extent about this in this episode, but maybe if you could just stretch that out just a quick second, because again, it's just very elegantly displayed here by the good folks at Mutual Aid for the Homies.
Well, the important thing about this tweet is that I actually will be in conversation with them on Saturday about my article, Modern U.S. Racial Capitalism, Some Theoretical Insights. And so that is a quote from that article. So that was part of the reason I retweeted that, because, you know, as a precursor to our conversation. But in terms of what it actually means, is basically that, I've said elsewhere, the only thing that the U.S. hates as much as Black people is radicals. And that is because the U.S. is constitutively anti-radical and anti-Black. And so, elsewhere, I've gone back all the way to the Alien and Sedition Acts, and the way in which the Alien and Sedition Acts were a response not only to radicals who came from the French Revolution, but also people who are fleeing the Haitian Revolution and bringing enslaved Africans with them. And there was a fear that those enslaved Africans would then radicalize mainland Africans on the continent. And so there's a way in which the Alien and Sedition Acts were a form of consternation about, Black freedom, right? And so there's a way in which the fear of that radicalism was sutured to a fear of Blackness and a fear of Black freedom. So it goes 1798, right? So the 1776 was the start of the American Counter-Revolution. 1798 is the Alien and Sedition Act. 1781 or 1791 is what the Articles of Confederation or whatever, or the shift from the Articles of Confederation to the Constitution. And so this is early on in the history, right, where we already see the implication of anti-radicalism and anti-Blackness. So the U.S. racist and it's capitalist, period.
There it is, period. So I had to pull this one up because we did have the hate awards, and the face you're making while Sister Jackie, as you called her, I think accurately, she has to accept it, the people's prophetess. Yeah. Look, as we did the hate awards was all love, satirical love, a show about all that prevents and supports revolution. Clearly you are on your way eventually to winning Hater of the Year with all the good work you do on hate.
2021 is my year.
That's
2021 is
clear.
My year.
So I just had to share. Anyway, this was just too. I couldn't pass this one up. And then this one, I know we were trying to keep this light, but I did see this on your timeline. It was certainly on mine, and the transition and the commemoration of Sister Nahanda Abiodun, one of the more bright, brilliant lights of Black liberation struggle. Anyway, so I don't know if you wanted to say anything more about her as well, but I did want to. Anyway.
I had the great fortune to meet her actually in 2000.
I did too.
Yeah, in 2000 and I guess it was 18. The Caribbean Studies Association was in Cuba, and I happened to be on a panel with Henry Taylor, who is the father of Keeanga-Yamahtta Taylor. With Tayshian Latner, he had organized this panel, and we're talking about third worldism and anti-colonialism. And she attended the panel because Henry Taylor's paper was about her and about her struggles and then her exile in Cuba. And so afterwards, I was fortunate enough to have conversation with her, to have drinks with her. She's amazing, very tall, very just a wealth of knowledge. And so when I saw that she had passed away, I was like, wow, I am so fortunate to have been able to be in conversation with her. But, I think that we know a lot about Assata. I think that we know significantly less about Nahanda. And so that is for those of us who do research, to definitely lift up her story and lift up her contributions to the struggle for Black freedom.
Right on.
Yeah.
And actually that was it. That's all I had.
So that's what's in them tweets. I look forward to to continue to see, what's what's going on these timelines and what craziness I have I have been on at any given time. So now, the last segment of each episode will be about what I'm on, right? So it's called What I'm On. And what I mean by that is like, what am I working on? What am I thinking about? What are, some of the questions, ideas, or themes that I'm interrogating at a particular moment? So what I'm on currently is trying to ease back into my book, y'all, my book manuscript. Black Scare, Red Scare, Anticommunism, Antiblackness, and the Rise of U.S. Capitalism. So that is the title now. The title used to be Radical Horizon of Black Betrayal, and it very well might be something else by the time it comes out. But let me tell you something, okay? Number one, writing a book is hard. So this is my first single authored manuscript. Of course, I co-authored a book with Gerald Horne, and that was a different type of project. This project of sort of laying out my theoretical and sort of conceptual, historical, sociological, and political theoretical ideas over a book-length manuscript is so hard. And like, I would be lying if I said I wasn't facing some kind of like struggles just sitting down and doing the project, especially because of COVID. So one thing, right, is that I never write in my house. I never have really. I usually write in cafes. And so it's been a real struggle to get into a sort of consistent writing rhythm at my house. So that's one thing. So I was doing a lot of writing groups from March until I would say about maybe September. I was doing writing groups and that was helping. But it's also just sort of like figuring out the chapter order and just sitting down and actually doing the writing has been a real struggle. And so I was like, all right, y'all. February 1st is my new year. So usually I know the new year started in January, but I didn't get it together until late January, going into February. So I was like, all right, February 1st, getting back into this book, reacquainting myself and just really sitting down and doing the work. And in many ways, I feel like I'm always writing Black Scare, Red Scare. Like I'm always thinking about it. I have, my writing notebook. I'm jotting down ideas. I'm writing adjacent pieces that are helping me to work out smaller theoretical ideas, but it's hard, and it's like, sometimes I'm like, can I do this shit? I think I can. I know I can, but it's very, very difficult. But essentially, just, in a broad sense, what is Black Scare, Red Scare? So this is a book that I'm really trying to think about what is the relationship between capitalism, anti-Black racism, Wall Street imperialism, and what I'm calling the structural location of Blackness or the political economy of Blackness. What is the relationship between those in the rise of the United States to global hegemony between basically World War I and the early Cold War? And there's a lot of different moving parts. There's a lot of different ways in which I'm trying to approach this question. I'm looking at these different artifacts or case studies as my sort of archive of evidence and thinking about this archive of evidence in relationship to each other, but also in relationship to the themes of each chapter. And so I would say the most difficult part about writing it is really the relationship between like the theoretical and the concrete, like how to concretize. I think in a very sort of theoretical and abstract way, because that's just sort of how I figure things out, but trying to sort of point out, okay, so this is my framework, how can I make it so that it is rooted in the archive or rooted in a sort of specific example. And so that is a sort of a constant, something that I'm constantly grappling with, and also making sure that the chapters have a broad through line. So one way that people are, some of my mentors have reframed this so that it doesn't just seem like a big project is that, my preferred genre is journal articles. And so they're like, a book is basically a collection of journal articles. But if that's the approach, there still has to be a through line so that this is a book and not just simply a collection of essays. So I'm working it out, y'all. So I'm working on the introductory chapter, which is reading this economist, Frank H. Knight, against the historical sociology of Oliver Cox, using Cox's work to point out the elisions or point out the silences in Frank Knight's system of free enterprise. So the way that he narrates U.S. capitalism, and how Cox's narration, which brings to the fore foreign exchange, imperialism, and racial antagonism, how that sort of reveals the racial capitalist nature of U.S. society. Now, I use the term capitalist racism instead of racial capitalism. I'll talk about that more in subsequent shows, but essentially I use that neologism to sort of show that I'm building on Cedric Robinson's work. Not really built. So to show that I'm in conversation with not only Cedric Robinson's work, but many, many other people who have thought together racialization and capitalist exploitation, but that I'm trying to offer up something that's firmly rooted in the capitalist world economy and the capitalist world system, and also taking the United States as my as the place through which I'm thinking about the different dynamics that I talked about earlier. So that's what I'm on, trying to get back into my writing routine, trying to work consistently on this book. And then just trying to remind myself that I wrote a very long dissertation, a very long, very dense dissertation. So I've written something this length before. I co-authored a book, but, and then just figure out ways to be able to just, get used to writing at home, because I don't think that, I think we're going to be in here for a while, for a number of reasons. But so that's what I'm on. And that was the show for today. So let's see. We talked about, the overview of the show, me and Jared. I did the history of the present quote, talking about William Patterson and, the savages ruling in the modern exploitative society. I will always love that quote. We looked at what's in these tweets. And then finally, I spoke about, what I'm on, my book, Black Scare, Red Scare, and where I'm at with it. All right. So that's it. Jared, any closing thoughts?
Other than that you may indeed be the last dope intellectual. This is a very dope show. I'm very happy to be part of it. And I'm thankful for that last segment that you did about the writing process, especially when we're stuck in these quarantine situations, because that's real talk. That's very important. So thank you very much for that.
Well, thank you. All right, y'all. That's our show for this Friday evening. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with me. So thanks for tuning in. I'm Dr. CBS here with Dr. Gerald Ball, and we are signing off.